Hello, this is Malachi Bishop with the Rehabilitation Counseling Program at the University of Kentucky, and this is RC-650, Rehab Counseling Theories and Techniques 1. Today we're going to be talking about culture from a counseling theory perspective, multicultural competencies, and the concept of culture, a topic we discuss in each of our courses in some respect. Today we're going to talk about multicultural competency and culture from some perspectives specific to the counseling theory perspective and the perspective of this course. Questions we're going to be talking about are: how does our culture as a counselor affect our counseling, and how does our client's culture affect our counseling, and how can we be sure that our own cultural beliefs and identities do not get in the way of our effectively serving our clients. We're also going to be thinking about this idea of theory and cultural context. So we're going to look at this first question of how does our own personal culture affect our counseling, and how, and to look at this, I'd like to invite you to participate in an exercise where we think about some aspects of our culture. And for the purpose of this exercise, I want you to think of culture as the characteristics that affect our view of the world and our client's view of the world. Generally, culture, I think of culture as the values and thoughts and ideas and beliefs that we share with the other groups that we, with the groups that we belong to individually. And each of us is associated with many cultures. We all belong to and identify with a number of different groups. So I'd like you to think about some of your own cultural characteristics. For example, your age and the values and beliefs and ideas that you identify with because of when you were born and the time in which you grew up, your gender, your ethnicity, your parents' level of education and occupation, your religious, spiritual background and associations, your socioeconomic status and that of your family when you were growing up, how many languages you speak, your birth order when you were born, and whether you're an oldest child or a youngest child or a middle child or an only child, how many siblings you have, where in the country, where in the world you and your family are from, your political affiliation, and your level of education. And these are just some of the characteristics that create your lenses of perception, your perception of yourself and others and the world. The way you look at all that is through these lenses, which are colored by the values, beliefs, and ideas that we have developed in our growing up in the families we did, growing up in the age group that we did, and so on. So see what I did? I made some glasses there. These are the ideas that shape our view of the world. These lenses of perception determine and affect our perspectives as counselors about ideas like what is mental illness and mental health, what is disability, what is a healthy and normal and acceptable response or way of living, what is health and what is normal and what is acceptable. All these very important ideas which guide us in our counseling and our interventions are affected by our our lenses of perception, the groups to which we belong and with which we identify. How can we be sure that our own cultural beliefs and identities do not get in the way of our serving our clients? We can, first of all, be aware of the potential for differences to impact the counseling process, both implicitly and explicitly. So the ways that we don't even think of, or we're not even aware of, the subtext, the decisions we make because of the assumptions that we are making, because of our culture, our cultural background, and that of our client. And the explicit level, the things that we do and say that everybody can see, again, based on our own cultural background and that of our client. Talk with clients about culture and ethnicity and disability. Feel comfortable having conversations, asking questions. Having conversations about these things will help you to avoid making incorrect assumptions, and I think also is a way of showing respect. You want to understand this person and their view of the world so that you can more effectively work with them. We can also do this by examining our own values and perspectives and think about some of the groups we belong to and the ideas we have, for example, in the area of religion and spirituality. For some of us, some of you, and certainly some of your clients, religion and spirituality is a big deal, a big part of the decisions that we make and the things that we do. So we're talking about belief in a reality that transcends physical nature, belief that provide meaning and interconnectedness, afterlife, beliefs about God, and obviously religion also is the formal and social ways that we participate in all of these beliefs. To what extent do you personally identify with this spiritual religious perspective, and how important is it to you? And what does that perspective, if you do have one, how might that perspective affect the things that you do as a counselor? If your client has strong religious or spiritual feelings, and how is that going to affect you if you do not, or if yours is different? So those sorts of questions, it's important to think about that. Socioeconomic status. This is a complex idea, not only the objective facts of income and work status and education level, but the internalizing or rejecting of social expectations based on socioeconomic status and the response to a person perceived to be in other classes or status. So it will in your career frequently be the case that you are perceived as being in a different socioeconomic class or status than the person that you're working with. And we need to be aware that differences or perceived differences may be an issue in your ability to establish a counseling relationship. Sexual identity, sexuality, and gender identity. So issues we need to think about to develop some awareness about our own values and perspectives in this area. Whether we're talking about gender identity, our ideas about what it is to be a male or a female, and again, internalizing or deciding to reject societal expectations that people have based on gender and male or female. Sexual identity and sexual orientation, and our own thinking and feeling about sexuality, which is another big complex idea. Incorporates biological, psychological, social, emotional, spiritual dimensions. It is a comprehensive idea, dimensions including self-perceptions as our ideas about ourselves as sexual beings, as men and women, and our feelings about sexual activities and behaviors. Race and ethnicity, which Right et al. Defined as ethnic groups will be so defined if they share a common socio-history, have a sense of identity of themselves as a group, and have common geographical, religious, racial, and cultural roots, the central core of each ethnic group, welding it together with the thread of belief, styles of being, and adapting is culture. And race is, at this point, a dubious biological designation, and really, over time, race and the idea of race has really become a problematic and an increasingly meaningless idea from a lot of perspectives. But obviously it's important to think about our own ideas, values, beliefs about ethnicity, our own identity with our various ethnic associations and that of our clients. It's important to be aware that different groups have had different sociological histories in the U.S. and the world, and that history continues to impact our own perceptions. It's important to understand the history of different ethnic groups in the United States, because for a lot of people, a lot of us, what the experience of the ethnic group that we identify with in the history of the United States or in the history of the world is still very much with us, very much a part of us, something we identify with, and is very important to us. Privilege and castification in services is the idea that some ethnic groups have traditionally and continue to experience more privileged positions. They're more likely to receive services, more likely to receive better services than some other ethnic groups. Age differences. Again, you will, in the course of your career, work with people who are older and younger than you, and these differences are not necessarily a problem, but they are something we need to think about and be aware of. Different life experiences are associated with different age groups. People who've lived in different times have had different shared experiences. And age differences can certainly affect the level of trust, the expectations that the client has because the counselor is younger or older. Certainly can affect the client's view of your competence. Generally, this is going to be more of an issue if the client is much older and you are perceived as much younger. Then there may be questions in the client's mind about your competence as a counselor because you will be seen as less experienced than somebody older. Respect is also an issue there. Disability-based differences. Again, people have experienced difference based on disability status, experience of community, and shared experiences based on living with or identifying as a person with a disability. And again, this idea of internalizing or rejecting societal expectations based on disability type. And there has been research, quite a bit of research over the years looking at, doesn't matter if does it change the outcome or change the process if the counselor is seen as a person with a disability or not. Is it important to match counselor and client in terms of disability? All sorts of interesting questions have been looked at there. But certainly these perceptions of difference in this area can also affect or impact the counseling relationship. Ideas about location. There exist, even within the United States, certainly attitudes and biases based on where you come from in the United States. So we have cognitive schemas. We have a set of ideas associated with people based on where they are from. We have ideas about people from Eastern Kentucky versus Western Kentucky versus Central Kentucky. We have ideas about Yankees and Southerners and people from California and so on. So even regional location is associated with a set of ideas, expectations, which people may internalize or reject, may be a part of their identity that is important to them, important in the counseling relationship, maybe not. So these and other sorts of differences have the potential to be counseling issues and issues in your ability to establish an effective counseling relationship. Thinking about theories of counseling that we've been studying, and being a multiculturally competent counselor, it is important to realize that there is no theory of counseling that is politically or morally neutral. Every theory comes from somebody's or some group of people's perspective. Theories that require emotional expressiveness, like Gestalt, or verbalization, like person-centered, or insight, like psychoanalysis, or are individually focus very much on the individual as opposed to a group or family or more collective perspective, like most of the theories we talked about, that focus on talk rather than action and so on. Each of these are based on a cultural perspective where these things are valued and seen as important to well-being, mental health, and the way to help people solve problems. It's important to realize that there are people who associate themselves with cultures where emotional expressiveness is not done, or is not seen as the norm, or is not going to be seen as effective. Emphasis on being able to verbalize, emphasis on individual versus collective decision making. All of these things. There are people who, for whom these approaches would be effective, and there are people for whom they would not be effective. But every theory, including yours, is based on a specific perspective. So how do we become multiculturally competent? We've talked about some ideas. Thinking about your own values, thinking about your own theory. A few others include thinking about your view of the counseling process, your own view of counseling and how it works and why it is effective, and realizing that other people will have other views and ideas about that. Understanding that socio-political and economic circumstances have shaped and influenced minority groups. As I said, we carry that with us, and for some of us that is an important part of our identity. Learning about the history and respecting the worldviews of different cultural groups. Practicing and mastering a variety of counseling skills and techniques so that you have the ability to choose the most appropriate technique or approach for this client. For example, you will have clients for whom group therapy might be more effective and more efficacious than individual therapy. You'll have some clients for whom the empty chair technique is going to be highly effective, and others for whom it is so completely foreign that it would make them feel very comfortable, and it would be highly inappropriate to use that approach. So the point is, we need to have in our toolkit of techniques, we need to have a variety of skills and techniques so that we can use the ones that work best for this client that we're working with. And then lastly, we talked about communicating, having conversations about these differences, asking questions, allowing your client to ask questions, reading and learning and immersing ourselves. The best way to learn about a culture that you are going to be working with people from is to immerse yourself in it, to participate in it, to learn about it by that participation. So some ideas, some things to think about in terms of counseling theory and being a competent counselor from a multicultural perspective.